each of us is going to read a little, and then we'll talk among ourselves, and then with you, we hope. It's a special joy for me to be with Erica, because I remember years ago reading something that she had said, that she had seen plenty of smart men with dumb women, but she rarely sees a smart woman with dumb men. And tonight we refute that. Very sorry that Alice McDermott isn't here, and she is too. She very much wanted to be with us tonight, but there was a family crisis and she couldn't be. But to tell you the truth, she's not here, and I'm not sure I'm here. Something odd happened today. I meant to tell you too about this. My wife looked up in horror and said, "Do you know that your obituary is in the Harvard Alumni Magazine?" I said,
"You're kidding."
I've lived a long life, but nobody's ever said such a thing to me. So I looked, and it's true. As far as I can tell, I'm dead. This must be of some interest to you, too, I assume. By the way, the obituary used the present tense. He is dead, but he continues to write and this and that. So I thought this is getting more and more interesting. But the sad part of it was that she was looking at an issue that came out in September, October, which means not only am I dead, but nobody cared. Anyway, my dear friend Paul will read to us, and then Erica, and then I.
Yes, just we're going to read something very brief. Actually, maybe I'll just sit. Will I sit, stand? I honestly don't know. Hard to say. So this is, I decided, you were hearing in that lovely introduction that I try from time to time to write song lyrics. And, you know, I realized that quite recently I came upon something which I think is the quintessential song lyric title. And I want to share it with you this evening, not only the title, but the rest of it. And it is, "I love you, but you love him." and of course you can move that around. In a strange way, nothing more need be said. But I have to say something, I guess.
Sure.
So, "I love you, but you love him," a song lyric. I love what's fair and square, and any situation where your yin fits my yang. Say 25, it's okay. You love love triangles and all the bits that dangle from the guy with whom you hang. I love back slang, you love a back rub. I love the shower, you love the tub. I love my grub, you love the gym. I love you, but you love him. I love films like Ben-Hur and John Ford westerns where they put the horse before the cart. You love to seem artless, though you set out to be heartless to the guy you met on St. Bart's. I love to make a start. You love to call a stop. I love the blues. You love hip-hop. I love roll mops. You love Pacific Rim. I love you, but you love him. I love gas stations where they'll happily give you air at no extra cost. You love colossal bores and other old fossils like the guy to whom I've lost. I love Robert Frost, you love R.M. Rilke. I love wool, you love silk. I love whole milk, you love skim. I love you.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful, John.
Thank you very much.
It's really wonderful.
You going to read, or do you want me to read?
I will read. So I was looking for definitions of love. I've written piles of love poems, piles of them. And I was going to read one of them. There are many that I still like a lot, some that I wrote at Barnard, for God's sake, and some that I wrote last year. But Roger called and said, you're going to read a poem about love. And what do you know? I wrote a poem about love. So here's my inspiration. I was looking through a book of poems about love, and I was looking at definitions of love. And nobody agrees on what love is. And that was amazing to me. So I decided I would write, What is Love? And I dedicate it to my last husband, KDB, Ken. What is love? Friendship set on fire? A chess game with no rooks? A fiery queen? A frozen king contemplating moves? Easy to begin like war, but hard to end? Love rules without rules, the Italians say. Amore regge senza legge. Sunlight on nakedness? Companionship with juice? A comedy, a tragedy, a melodrama, a satire on human foolishness? Neediness, seediness, lust, trust? Two people who combust? Colliding stars? Planets fusing at ferocious heat? Love is all these things. Love stings, love sings.
Not only is that wonderful, but Erica wrote that today.
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
To be fair.
Okay. Not bad, kiddo. Anyway, this is an announcement of a wedding. I don't know if they still do this, but when the three of us can remember, and I'm sure you two, the Times used to give elaborate write-ups of marriages. So this is one of those. It's preceded by an epigram. I just say people sometimes get married for the same reasons poets write sonnets. Form rescues content. Oh, blushing bride, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Parents of the bride of Who Cares, Rhode Island, and Breathless, South Carolina, was married yesterday to handsome groom the third, son of Mr. Father of the groom of Boston and Maine, and Mrs. Mother of the groom of Baltimore and Ohio. The ceremony was performed in No Standards Church by the rector, Canon Beloved. Miss Sister was the maid of honor, Mr. Brother the best man. The bride, who made her debut at the Desperado Cotillion, is an alumna of small college. The bridegroom, a graduate of large Eastern University, is with substantial national bank. The couple will reside in Best Chester. Or so it reads. Yet now he rails at her for thinking Vermeer was a Yiddish expression. And she throws a raving fit in Costco, of all places, because he waltzed in late last night and spilled rye on the Cuisinart. He hums, love me or leave me. She hums, here's that rainy day. That, of course, comes long after the stripping of the wallpaper, the staining of the floors, the exposure of the beams. When those beams are exposed, we're going to have some joy here, baby, I'll tell you that. Look at those beams. You ever see such beams? Of the 6 marriages announced on page 83 of the Sunday paper, 2.2 will fail, 2.3 will last, 1.5 will fail and last. The lovely faces fill their squares. Young women with clear, glinting eyes and miraculous teeth. Miraculous nothing. Cost us a mint to get those teeth in line. When she was 12, we thought she'd wind up marrying Bugs Bunny. Ha, 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 ha. Ah, Mr. Wedding Photographer, you catch them in the pink. These are action shots, are they not? The ball at the crack of the bat, the sail blown full, the trout in pirouette, all splash in color, you sports photographer, you. The truth is that Blushing's folks did not, when it comes down to it, really announce the engagement of their daughter. They could barely spit out the words. So dismayed were they that their little princess should throw herself away on a wimp like groom. The truth is that Handsome's dad said the boy was marrying beneath him. The truth is that Sister is sick with envy and Brother red with hate. The truth is that no one will think it will work. Do you, Blushing? I do. Do you, Handsome? Oh, very much. Go to it anyway, bride and groom. Damn the statistics. Full speed, deliberate speed. Strip that wallpaper. Expose those beams. Expose those hearts. Take this waltz. There is no good reason on earth why you should not reside happily ever after. At the same time, there is no good reason you should not. And if the truth is that your goose is cooked at the altar, then the truth may be made wrong too, you know. Can be made to look like a dope in a single spur-of-the-moment decision to be gentle and patient. against the jeering mobs and the hoots outside. Are you game or just married? In the morning, in the plaza, the two of them in bed prop their iPads against their knees and address the wedding pictures. Between the melon and the sweet rolls, they agree they photograph beautifully. So,
Sorry, Dave.
what do we talk about when we talk about love? What do we write about when we write about love? Why is it so difficult? You gave us that in the wonderful poem. Why is it so difficult to define?
To define love, I think you have more enthusiasm for love if you've been married a lot. I find that because I've been married 4 times, I still believe in love. And one of the things you were writing about in that wonderfully funny piece you wrote is the disappointment that happens after you say, I'm in love. And mostly, love leads to disappointment. And Paul, you were writing also about the tragedy of love. I love you, but you love him. That's, you know, happy love doesn't seem to make good songs. Happy love doesn't make funny satires.
It doesn't, I'm afraid. Not only when it comes to writing, but in our day-to-day lives. In other words, when your best friend comes along to you and says, oh, you wouldn't believe I've met the most wonderful woman, or the most wonderful man. And you know, one feigns interest. However, if they come along and say, you know, I've had the most dreadful experience with Jimmy or Jane.
Right?
You're immediately,
your ears perk up.
Absolutely. You say, tell it, well, because you don't want to say, tell us more, because that would be too forward, but you say, really? Huh. Or words to that effect. So I do think, you know, alas, when things are going wrong, I suppose there's a little more interest. I mean, it would be dreadful to think that the great poetry of joy and delight and exaltation can't be written to the extent that it was once. One wants to believe that that is possible, and certainly there have been wonderful, focusing on the poetry for the moment, wonderful poems written along the way. But that kind of unabashed joy, I think, is probably more difficult to present.
Right. And when you look for joyous love poems, they are few and far between. I mean, one of them is, come live with me and be my love, right, and we shall all the pleasures prove. I mean, the happy poems of love are absolutely in the minority. If you look at an anthology of love poems, that's absolutely clear.
And I think it's one of the reasons why it's difficult enough to find an appropriate poem for a wedding. I mean, right, one can't really read "and death shall have no dominion,"
right?
Because you know that one would tend to reach for that,
right,
at those times. But it's hard to find a joyous wedding poem. I'm a particular fan of John Donne. I was looking at some of his poems.
I was thinking of Donne.
Oh, he's amazing.
I mean, he actually can do both, of course, to remarkable effect. But yes, hard to find for the wedding.
Did you think that, I always was interested in how Donne was able to go from love of a woman to love of God and be equally successful as a poet. Did he connect the two, do you think?
Well, certainly he brought the same enthusiasm.
There's no doubt that God is a woman.
So that made it easy.
Right.
Yes, well, I mean, his style is so forthright, and he, you know, forgive me for upping and walking about here. I did bring a couple of, should I read a little?
Please.
You know, I think possibly the greatest, in my book, the greatest poem ever written, I have To His Mistress Going to Bed. We probably shouldn't read that for a little while, maybe after 9 o'clock. But The Flea, I think, is
I love The Flea.
The perfect poem. the greatest come hither, it's more than a come hither, the greatest poem having to do with plotting and assignation. Actually, it's more than that. It's talking somebody into bed. So the flea, with its, the puce, of course, there's a phrase here about purpling the nail. And the French word, of course, puce, reflects the colour of the flea. I don't know if any of you have been up close and personal with a flea. I myself haven't, but I believe...
I hope not.
I believe they're purplish. The flea. Mark but this flea, and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. Me it sucked first. And by the way, I hope you don't mind my bringing this up, but in the orthography of the period, an S and an F were more or less indistinguishable. Me it sucked first, and now sucks thee. And in this flea our two bloods mingled be. Confess it, this cannot be said a sin, or shame, or loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Would you like to read the second verse? Why not?
Where are we?
Oh, stay, 3 lives.
Oh, stay, 3 lives and 1 flea spare, where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed, and marriage temple is, though parents grudge, and you, we are met, and cloistered in these living walls of jet. Though use make you apt to kill me,
yes.
Let not do this, self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing thee. Cruel and sudden, hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence? In what could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphst, and say that dost, find not thyself, nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true, then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou yields to me, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. He's trying to seduce her.
He's trying to seduce her. I mean,
with a flea.
The most
by killing a flea.
The most wonderful concept here, I think, is that if she were to kill the flea, she would be committing 3 sins. Murder, in killing him because he's in there. Self-murder, suicide, because she's in there. And sacrilege, because the flea now represents the temple in which their marriage has been secured. So the greatest pickup poem ever written, perhaps.
But you know, it's very interesting to me that many of the best poems in the world are written by poets who want to get between the sheets with a certain lady. And I can tell you that my early poems were all about being free and somebody being disposable. I'll read you one. And this is something I wrote when I was very young.
Now, was this in fruits and vegetables?
No.
By any chance? No.
I don't know where it was. Maybe it was earlier than that. To X with ephemeral kisses. I hear you will not fall in love with me because I come without a guarantee, because someday I may depart at whim and leave you desolate, abandoned, grim. If that's the case, what use to be alive? In loving life, you love what can't survive. And if you grow too fond and lose your head, it's all for naught, for someday you'll be dead. Maintain a cool detachment through the years. Wear blinders, dear. Put cotton in your ears, since worms will taste the tongue that tastes the wine. Burst not the grape against your palate fine. With care, your puny heart will still be whole the day they come to fetch your tepid soul. And you'll have And as that strumpet life deals her last blow, you'll have this final consolatio. You'll snap your flippant fingers as you fall and say, I never cared for her at all. Nice. And you know, all my poems were like that. They were about embrace life. Come with me, embrace life, don't be scared.
It sounds as if you might have been, or must have been, under the influence of the Elizabethans.
It sounds like a metaphysical poem.
It does, and that sounds very much like a Donne poem or a Shakespeare poem.
Or a to his coy mistress poem.
I was very much under the influence of poetry, a wonderful poetry teacher who said, learn to write a decent sonnet or ballad before you write free verse. And I think it was a wonderful thing. And now I find myself doing occasional rhymes, and I love it. Why give up those rhetorical devices?
No reason.
You never do, Paul.
The beauty of writing a sonnet, and Richard Wilbur said to remember that the strength of the genie comes from the fact that he lives in a bottle.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And the power of being feeling that form, not being able to break the form. So all the strength of the work comes from within it. This is a digression, but when Paul was talking about the people who say, I've just met the most wonderful woman, a terrible memory came back to me. Henry Fairley was a wonderful fellow, and I worked with him at the New Republic many, many years ago. Henry was always falling in love with younger women, much younger women, and he would say, I'm in my second childhood. And I'd say, yes, Henry, but they're in their first. And there was one terrible night, there was a blizzard, and he said, I finally met the most wonderful, this went on every week, I met the most wonderful woman, etc. And she sings in the Hilton Hotel. So I said, that's grand, I'm on my way home. He said, no, I want you to hear her.
Oh, God.
And I'm not, it's a blizzard, so I said, all right, Henry, but I don't really have all the time in the world. So we go, we're the only people in the hotel, of course, there's a blizzard going on, except this singer. And she's dreadful, and and she's going on one stupid song after another. And I said, Henry, I really am. I'm going to go home. If she sings "Feelings," I'm out of here, right then. She sang "Feelings," and I was out of it. So thank you for bringing it back. Why is it easier to be clever in poetry than it is to be emotional in poetry? In poetry of love, is it because language that we can harden the language?
I think because the language that we use for beautiful things is the same language we tread upon every day in life. And it's hard to purify the language and make it essential, very hard. And it only happens in moments of great change in life. I believe people often say to me, oh, I can't read poetry. I don't like poetry. And then their first grandchild is born, and they call and they say, I need a poem. Or they fall madly in love, and they call and they say, I need a poem. Or their mother dies, and they call and they say, I need a poem for the funeral. So it lives in those moments of life when everything is changing, and everything is so incredibly serious. So people do need poetry. They just don't know they need it.
There's love prose too, though. One of the stories, the novels that you think are the best lovers? Who are the best lovers in literature?
Anna Karenina.
And she was the best lover in history. Anna Karenina.
Madame Bovary.
Heathcliff, Crazy Heathcliff.
Well, you know, I'm a big fan of James Joyce. I'm not sure of Molly Bloom, I suppose.
Oh, yes.
She would be up there, wouldn't she?
Phenomenal.
She would.
Yeah. I mean, she's a complex character, of course, but as she must be.
And he wrote these amazingly filthy letters to her.
Yes, he did.
Which I treasure.
Yes, he was quite forthright, I think, in his his desire for Nora Barnacle, and of course in that era, the very first letters he wrote when he met her in June in 1904, 16th of June. They wrote, if you recall, they wrote to each other 3 or 4 times a day. Mm-hmm. A day.
That's love.
Well, also, that's a postal service. Because those letters were delivered and responses were given, and that was happening 3 or 4 times a day in Dublin. And we think we're pretty nifty with the email and all the rest of it. But, you know, who could resist the hand-delivered, scurrilous suggestion?
Right.
From,
you know, let's talk about love and email. I send poems to my husband, whom I still love, and he gets so many emails a day, he can't even find them in his email.
Really? There's got to be some way of prioritizing, though. What? Don't you put an exclamation point or something beside them?
But getting the word out, now that we have the internet, has gotten harder and harder, because we're all deluged with various kinds of, you know, messages.
It's true. I know this is an odd thing to confess, but friends of mine in the audience will attest it's true. I've only used email in the last 2 or 3 years, and I've picked up every teenage symbol, every teenage abbreviation. So then I speak in them. I'm surprised I'm not saying OMG right now,
right.
LOL, and I've become a teenage girl, and I like it.
Paul, coming from the country that has produced, in my opinion, the greatest writers in the English language.
I'm an American? Yes.
No, I mean,
Ireland.
As an Irish-born person.
Yes.
Was that inspiring or overwhelming? To be writing in the language of James Joyce, of Oscar Wilde, who is, of course, Irish, of...
You know, I think for most of us who are attempting to write, it's, I think, one way of dealing with these extraordinary presences is, in a strange way, to make them slightly absent.
Right.
And, I mean, if one thought for more than 30 seconds about the achievement of James Joyce, one would go to bed and never get out of it. I mean, he is, you know, there are many writers, there are a number of writers who I certainly, you know, in moments of hubris or lunacy or whatever, imagine that I actually might stand a chance of doing that. I might actually, on a really good day, if all the planets were aligned, and everything was just working as they seem to be, and everything was working perfectly, I might conceivably write a poem that was sort of reaching up to the condition of one of Yeats's really bad ones. You know, in a moment of lunacy, one might think that. With the case of James Joyce, wouldn't even cross my mind. It's just impossible. He's out there on his own. And so, you know, I think one doesn't think about it. One does one's best. One tries to be true to one's own moment. Who knows what Joyce would be up to these days?
There's something about being in the company of writers, whether or not you're competing.
Oh, yes,
just being in the company of the ones who are wonderful and that know that you're doing the same thing. You're not doing it as well. No. You're not doing it as frequently as well. But you're living in the same world of thought and dreams. It's very nice.
Well, I think certainly for some, I mean, in my case, Seamus Heaney was a particular example.
Lovely poet.
Brilliant. And the fact that he was writing poems about the life that was very familiar to us, the country life of Northern Ireland, I think gave many of us courage to try it ourselves. And I'm sure that we would love to think of what Beckett would be making of the modern
Edna
technology.
O'Brien did this incredibly brave thing. She wrote A Brief Life of Joyce.
Yes, I read that.
And she wrote it in Joycean language. And I just read that book, and I was blown away. I love Edna's work. I think she is a marvelous writer.
She is.
And playwright, and novelist, and essayist. And she carries that Joycean rhythm in this brief life.
Well, Edna, I mean, let's go back to love, if we may. I mean, Edna O'Brien, as many of you will recall, some of you will recall, you know, there was a furore, obviously, over the publication of Ulysses. But there was also a furore over the publication of Edna O'Brien in the late 50s or early 1960s.
When she wrote The Country Girl and The Lonely Girls.
The 1960s in Ireland, right? I mean,
she was a great inspiration to me, I have to say. When I read her first few novels, The Country Girl, The Lonely Girl, and Girls in Their Married Bliss,
yes.
She released me, in a way, to write honestly about women and their feelings. Most of her books about love are about love destroyed, love disappointed. But she and Doris Lessing, who was not Irish but African originally, living in England eventually, told me that women could write honestly about their lives.
But, you know, when she was doing that initially, and it's not very long ago, and it's not very long ago just at the same time when John McGahern, a great novelist and short story writer, was also banned, lost his job because he'd written a novel with love interest, you know, a sexual component. Not very long ago. So it's, I mean, I think it's interesting that, you know, we now live in an age where there's scarcely anything that smacks of the bashful. Everything is out there. Funny enough, I was reading a piece somewhere today about somebody saying that Sports Illustrated, which I think there's a tiny little bit of a scandal over the cover of it at the moment, the swimwear issue. Somebody was saying that used to be a big thing, and apparently it's no longer because of the world we live in. So, I mean, some of the, what am I trying to say? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe some of the mystery has gone out of love.
I think that's true. What is the best thing one might say? What is the best thing a writer might say to express love? If you were to say to Ken, you know, a phrase, a sentence that said, this is the way I love you, what would it be?
Well, last weekend I said to him, you are like no one else. And it's true.
It's true. Ginny says that to me, but she doesn't say it with the same accent. But that's a lovely thing to say. And you said something in a poem, I give way to you. Do you remember this?
I do.
Which I thought too. You are like no one else. I give way to you.
It's a kind of, love is a kind of surrender, but it's not about the red room in 50 Shades of Bullshit. That is not the way I imagine surrender. I think that what is very interesting to me, last year when Fear of Flying celebrated its 40th birthday and there were all these new editions, people came to me on a daily basis and said, how is Fear of Flying different from 50 Shades of Grey? And I would take a deep breath and say, well, one is written, the other's not, or whatever. And I was appalled that this book that had not even been copy edited, in which the heroine yells, holy cow, or holy shit every time she has an orgasm, that this was being compared to my rather literary first novel that got famous for the zipless fuck. I couldn't believe it. I think people don't read.
I'm sure that's right.
But I think that love is about surrender. Love is about submission, but not in the S&M sense.
Right.
It's not. I mean, I myself don't like S&M very much. Somebody who paddled my naked behind, I would not fall in love with.
I'm glad you told me now.
Yeah, right. However, there are a lot of women out there who want to be paddled, especially by a very rich man who gives them things.
It's a very expensive paddle.
But love is, in a way, a surrender, I believe. A surrender to another person, to the other person's life priorities, and not in a negative way.
Yeah.
No, I think in the sense of humility, perhaps.
Yes.
Ideally, that would
That's
be
why I
the
love
way.
that phrase, I give way to you.
Yes, well,
That's
you
a
know,
beautiful phrase.
yes, you know, it's not without a little bit of an edge, because the truth is that my wife is someone to whom I think it's fair to say, she's not here this evening, so I'll certainly say it. She's someone to whom I give way on virtually everything, because I've recognized after many years of being together that she does actually know best.
Yeah, that's an awful time. It's such an
That's an
awful
awful
thing to
moment
finally
in
realize.
marriage.
But you know, but when one realizes that, and I was so fat. I mean, we've been together now for 28 years, I believe it is, and I was interested in the title tonight, what we talk about when we talk about love. When I met her, as coincidence would have it, in my house in Belfast, there was a visitor to the city who was staying in my house while I was off doing something, in a situation where I actually connected with my wife. And staying in my house was a fellow called Raymond Carver. And so it's kind of interesting to see those things coming together. But, you know, I think when one accepts that, you know, is it really worth getting excited about whether or not we should strip? You're talking about the stripping, strip that cabinet or repaint that wall.
But it is amazing how couples will ruin themselves over nothing.
Well, that of course is because it's not about the wall.
Yes.
It's never
It's about something else.
Exactly.
It's not. It's about, you know, one of the writers on love says, and I can't remember who this is, where love is, power vanishes. I believe that is not true in marriage.
I think that's right.
Marriage is all about who has the power at any given moment. And the ecstatic moments with another person are the moments of humility,
Relinquishing
where you
power.
relinquish power.
Because what would that power look like anyhow? I'm not sure what it would
Well,
look
it would look like he's lying dead on the floor,
Yeah.
and you're
I
standing
find-
over him in
I
stilettos.
find discussions of people
Yeah.
lying dead very, very
It's been
touching.
so long. It's
Given-
been
I've
so
given my
long, I
condition.
can't remember.
To you before. Let me read to you something that's
Are you
delightful.
telling me that nobody got in touch with your...
Not a single person. I've been dead since September. Things I can take, things I can't.
What's the circulation of the Harvard magazine?
Considerable. It's evidently the circulation of the magazine is better than my own. Things I can take, things I can't. I can take a punch, maybe not 2 punches or 3, but 1 to the belly or the face. I can take a punch. And a snub, I've been snubbed a lot, so I know I can take a snub. Walk past me here, don't invite me there, I can take it. I can take extreme heat and extreme cold. The heat was overwhelming in Lebanon and Israel. I climbed the rock of Masada in 100 degrees, which was no fun, but I could take it. And the cold, too, in Vermont and New Hampshire, those winters when the gas froze in the tank. And a slur. I can take a slur. Call me kike, heeb, Jew boy. I can take that, too, though I probably want to find out if you can take a punch. Gossips, I can take them as well. I don't like gossip, but I can live with it. And the company of fakes and tyrants and traitors and amiable accommodators for brief periods, I can take that. Disorder, it's difficult for a Virgo, but I can take it. And shocks, I can take shocks, and I can take a joke. And ingratitude, I kind of expect it. And cheapness and pettiness, even rejection, I can take that too. And an unlucky streak, treachery, if you must, it gets me down, but I can take it. Things I can't take. Your pain, the children's pain, the verdict of your glance.
That's really beautiful.
Not bad for a dead man.
I find that as I get older, I have more humility about love. And since I became a grandmother, I absolutely cannot bear to see the suffering of children anywhere in the world, whether it's the Syrian children who are being bombed to smithereens or whomever. I mean, I feel that all the children of the world are my children, and those are changes in my perception of love that I absolutely never expected.
Embrace the world.
Well,
you know, we're supposed to ask you.
Yes,
to
now
talk
you
to
should
us.
ask questions.
Should the lights go up, or should we go into darkness? Thank you. Hi. Do you have questions for us or comments for us?
You were mentioning James Joyce, that he had written some filthy letters.
You want to get a hold of them, yes.
Yes, no, those were not the first letters that he wrote, but a lot later on he did, yes. Well, did I say filthy? Yes, they're, yeah.
Yeah,
I want you to read them, therefore I said filthy.
I wonder if there was a distinction, between this new filth and the different filth, which I think you did distinguish from, but it's okay to be filthy, but is there a nice way to be filthy in poem?
Well, he was very intimate when he wrote to Nora. I mean, he wrote these amazing letters about sexual organs, about parts of the body that people don't usually write about. The anus, the beauty of her anus. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are amazing letters, and clearly he was motivated in writing them by his total adoration of her and her physicality. He adored her physicality. That is something you rarely find in literature.
Mm-hmm. They're not, I mean, I don't think they wouldn't count as pornography, for example, would they?
Well, the definitions of pornography have so changed over the years, but I find his descriptions of her physicality amazing.
They're lusty.
Yeah, lusty.
They're lusty letters. And they wouldn't have been the first, I mean, the first letters had to do with their next assignation. Mm-hmm. She was working, as you know, as a chambermaid in, and of course, speaking of the intimate areas of the body, one of his first books was called Chamber Music, and he was quite interested in the chamber pot, I think one would have to say, along the way. But the first letters are about assignations with her as she worked as a maid in Finn's Hotel. Actually, you could still see the sign for Finn's Hotel at a key point on Nassau Street in Dublin. So they were quite businesslike, and from what I recall, and he was on his best behaviour, I think, too, as one would be, as one woos.
He was wooing.
He was wooing.
And it's only later that he talks about the body, but he was avid to meet her, and that comes through, that passion.
Amazing.
More. Yes, in the back.
Oh, hi. I recently have reread Fear of Flying, and this is a question for Erica Jong. I was wondering about the conversation tonight made me think about love as literary, and Isadora Duncan as a sort of Emma Bovary, who's seduced by books, but goes on this quest for love, but writes out of a sense of disappointed love, unlike Emma Bovary.
Isadora Duncan?
Not Duncan.
Sorry. Isadora Wing. So I'm wondering if you had Emma Bovary in mind at all? Or
Absolutely not. Of course, I read like a lunatic, and I read everything, and I read many classic books before I was ready for them. When I was a teenager, for example, and I had no life experience to understand them. But I wasn't thinking of Emma Bovary at all. I was thinking of the literary young poet that I was, who was besotted with language and besotted with men. And I am still besotted with language and besotted with men. But it takes different forms as you get older, and you do have more humility about love, and you do realize how complicated love is. And as you get older, you realize that, I mean, I lived through the 70s. I now understand when people come to me and say, is it possible to have an open marriage? Something that my nieces and nephews always quiz me about. And I say, just remember, if you have a three-way, somebody is always looking out the window, and that person is not happy afterwards. So if you have no territoriality and no jealousy in you, of course, go ahead. But I have never met anybody who had no territoriality nor jealousy. So I'm much more humble about what's possible in love. Having experimented with these things at different times in my life, in marriages that didn't survive, I'm much more humble about what works and what doesn't work.
Also, the older you get, the more you're aware of love taking forms of kindness and patience and gentleness and things that don't have the edgy words to carry them, but nonetheless have just as great a reality.
To love somebody for years through all their annoying traits, this is an achievement.
And I can tell by looking at this group, everybody's nodding. Yeah. Talk to us more. Yes, sir.
So your discussions of love, they're fraught with a sort of a tension between the two people, power, surrender. What about the notion of you make me a better person, you make me laugh, you improve my life, you add a new dimension?
You're leaving out one cliche, and then I'm coming down and strangling you. No, you left out "you complete me." That's an interesting question, because I do think when we're talking about what you write about when you write about love, tension is important to writers because then we can use language better. What you say is absolutely true. You can have this wonderful expression between people, but it rarely will find its way into a work of prose or poetry, simply because the language won't have any purchase. You won't have any. None of us is claiming that writing about love is the same as experiencing love. One reason we write about it is in order to get as close as we can to it, but it always runs away from us.
That's very well put, I think. I think that it's very hard to write about love. And to make love interesting, you have to have, to make any book interesting, you have to have a problem, tension.
Right.
And a problem and tension doesn't come about when you have two people who absolutely adore each other and have no conflict. Where's the story? Story comes from problem, from tension. And much as we're interested in exploring the contents of our own brain, nobody will read it if they don't want to turn the page. And it's conflict that makes them want to turn the page, and the resolution of conflict.
That's right. More. Yes.
So the discussion has already sort of veered in this direction, but one thing I was thinking about earlier when you were talking about the fact that the majority of love poetry is about having your heart broken or being smashed to bits because someone's left you or whatever it is. It's very rarely sort of a joyous occasion. And I know that from my experience, when I'm happily in love, I have no interest in going home and writing a poem in the dark. It's only
Right.
when I have been like stabbed in the heart that I want to talk about what's bothering me. And I wonder if that explains it, but I also wonder too if one of the reasons writing about love in a positive way is difficult is because when you're in it, it's very hard to capture it. Like I often
I am reminded of a line by Anne Sexton, which has always stayed with me. And it's about an assignation, the poem is about an assignation in a hotel room, two lovers coming together. And she says, I have stolen God's book during a love affair. And that is what I remember about that poem. She's in the hotel room with her lover. They have this rapturous meeting, and she takes the Gideon Bible. And of course, it's symbolic also. I have stolen God's book during a love affair, because love, you know, the Bible is all about love and hate. But that always comes back to me. And I think that without those moments of tension and conflict, you have nothing.
And that tension and conflict doesn't always necessarily have to come between, from the lovers. In the probably most anthologized poem in English, Dover Beach, Arnold ends it by saying, our love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clashed by night. The only love part of that quotation is the first line, our love, let us be true to one another. The rest of it goes into modern history. And the idea that sometimes I think that you want to hold your love and then discuss something entirely different, you know, as he did, discuss the world. Yes?
You mentioned Joyce and love letters. You mentioned the internet. Are love letters passé, gone, because of the way we communicate now?
Not for me. I mean, I don't like email very much, although I use it all the time. And I've made a decision that for anything feeling, I'm going to write on paper. So if somebody loses their partner, loses their mother, whatever, I write a note. That doesn't go into the email maw.
Yeah.
If I love somebody, that goes into a note.
I think that's changing, though, alas.
Is it?
I believe it is, because the parent of an acquaintance died 6 months ago, and I said, you know, is there an address? What's the best address? Street address, of course, to which I might write. And she said, well, you could just send her an email. And I said, well, I don't think so. I don't think that's quite the case. But the fact that she suggested it made me think
Made it more acceptable. I didn't notice you sending me an email when I died, by the way.
Well, I don't read the Harvard magazine.
Oh.
I don't mean to sound...
Only the dead read the Harvard Alumni News.
Clear.
Yes.
And they don't write much.
No.
So that may be changing, but I do think it makes a difference to have something on paper.
I do too.
However, on a day-to-day basis, I've texted my wife today, and she texted me, and called me sweetie.
And you can't communicate with your children.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
You can't communicate with your children unless you text. They don't answer the phone.
No, that's right, and I do that with my kids too, and I mean, you can't beat that. In fact, I don't care that that's not on paper. And we haven't quite touched on that. I mean, I think one doesn't hold one word to be more beautiful or better, more interesting, or more anything than another. But I must say that the word dad, for me, is overwhelming, really.
Me too.
And, you know, we're talking about love.
Nobody ever called me Dad, Paul.
Okay. Well, I'm saying for me, perhaps Mom.
I'm kidding.
You know, we've been talking about that rapturous moment where, you know, we fall in love with someone, you know, the body is going crazy and the chemicals are fizzing and all the rest of it. And I've said to my children, can you imagine what it's like? How much I love you. I don't think you actually know how much I love you.
Do you know that you just gave song lyrics? Can you imagine how much I love you?
No, seriously. And I don't know if they do quite imagine it. And it's almost as if that rapture that one might find between consenting adults, as it were, is kind of extended. It's like an extension of that. It's the same rapture, and it doesn't go away 6 months later.
No.
You know? And then maybe to talk, I mean, just as you were talking about this, I mean, that may be for me, the greatest form of love that I experience, or the most intense form of love.
You're so right. The love for our children and the love they have for us, and it's absolutely without freight. You know, it's just it's inexpressible in some way, more in gesture than in words, and this moment of just joyous helplessness to the biology of having created these and having them. Although I do think of my granddaughter Jessie introducing me to her 4th grade class and saying, "This is my grandfather, Bappo. He lives in the basement and does nothing."
But you know, your phrase "biological helplessness" is perhaps what love is between men, women, men, women, whatever it is. It's biological helplessness.
And we are bonding as a tribe. We are bonding creatures. We are pair bonding creatures. There's no doubt about this in my mind. I know a lot of people live alone and like it. I know there have been times in my life when I have not had a partner, but I see the need in people to go back to that bond, to have a best friend in a cruel world, someone to go home to who understands your humor, your craziness, whatever. I think it's a very powerful feeling, and we are tribal creatures.
Right.
We are not loner creatures.
That's right. We're not meant to live in pairs.
Okay.
We're not really. I mean, I think the extended family, living in a couple living in one without the larger family group or whatever, that's, I think, a fairly recent development. And we shouldn't be surprised when, as so often
it doesn't
happens,
work out.
when it doesn't work out,
right.
Because, you know, one's asking for an awful lot.
Absolutely.
To make that work, and of course we're delighted when it does work, but it's hard.
Our children start appreciating us when they have children.
Yes, they can give us the children.
My adorable Molly said she had a daughter finally. She has 2 sons and a daughter. She said, "Mommy, Bet is going to do every horrible thing to me I did to you."
Jesus.
And our relationship fused in a new way when she had a daughter. And Bet is 7 years old and the most lovely child. And she shows no signs of being a monster, the monster she may become at 13. None whatsoever. But Molly is already anticipating that and apologizing to me.
Nice. Let's have one more question and then call it a night. Yes, sir.
I'm reading a book right now about love, and so I can't take credit for this question as my own, but at the beginning it poses the question, is love a feeling or is love a choice? And I was wondering what your thoughts are.
A bit of both.
I would think, don't you? A bit of both?
You know, I mean, for example, having been married for 28 years, I have chosen not to be, what would one say, to follow even in the slightest sense any instinct that I might have to look for a second time at someone else. Does that make any sense
It
to
does.
you?
Makes sense.
Do you feel it's a choice?
Well, I think that's a choice.
Sure it is.
Yeah, I think that's a choice, but the instinct is not a choice.
It's certainly a choice informed by feeling. Right? Thanks so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.